Okay, good morning, Rabotai. We are on page 15b3. Says the Gemara as follows. Oh, that's where we were up to. Avel eno mishalech korbenotav. And Avel cannot send his korban. What does that mean? Let's say he has a korban that he needs to bring, so he can't send the korban with somebody else to the Beit HaMikdash. The Tanya, the Braita says, Rabbi Shimon Omer, shilamim bezman shu shalem. When a person wants to bring a shilamim, when can he bring a shilamim? In a time when he is shalem, when he's whole. V'lo bezman shu onen, and not in a time when he is onen. Now, onen, as we said many times, is not the same as avel. Onen is in the period before the person has buried the met of their relative. So it's a little interesting that we're talking about avel, but we're mentioning onen. But the same reason which is true about onen not being whole is also true about a avel, a mourner, not being whole. Now, I want to just look at Rashi for 1 second together. Take a look at Rashi at the bottom. Rashi says, Rashi, see right on the side over here? The first word on the line is shalem. It's called shilamim. Why? Bizman shu shalem. What does Rashi say? Shalem b'da'ato, sheda'ato miyushevet alav. That you know why it's called shilamim? Because it's whole, it's perfect, it's unbroken. And that's not true when a person's da'at is not miyushevet alav, is not at peace with himself. A person in that period of time is not at peace, he's flying all over the place. What about this? He's the feeling. Now, look at the bottom. Rashi at the bottom says something a little bit different. It's 4 lines in the middle lines. You see that? In the not the thin lines, not the very wide, in the middle lines. 4 lines down. Keshu shalem, shalem besimcha ne'echal ve'avel eno shalem. Now, I thought this was incredible because one of them is talking about shlemut, perfection in life, being whole in life, is about having yishuv hadat, which means being at peace, being at rest. And when your mind is running around, I need to do this, I have to go there, the eulogies, the burial, the person is not at peace. Rashi at the bottom really adds something else. And he says that shlemut in a person, perfection in a person, a perfect person is a happy person. It's not only about being settled.
Content.
If you're not happy, more than content. Because it says simcha.
Right.
Now, you happen to be right. Because in the Mishnah and Avot it says, Ezu Ashir, who's a rich person, Hasameach bechilko. He's happy in his lot.
Right.
So normally that's translated as a person's happy with what he has, and we would call that content. But I think that the Mishnah is actually telling me more. Like, you could be content with what you have, but not happy with it.
Content is neutral.
Right.
Yours is positive.
So sameach bechelko, even though it's translated as being content with what you've got, it's really more than that. Are you content with the wife that you got, or are you happy with it? Right? Everyone, just making sure everyone who's involved is answering that question correctly for the videotape. Okay, Joe, we hold it on that. Okay, let's continue. So the pasuk said that's why he's got it in his ears. Had that. That's why he knows he don't want to get in trouble. I love you. All right, says the Gemara. All right, v'lo bizman shu onen. So when a person is in avelut, so he can't bring a korban. So too says the Gemara. If that's the case, so when a person is avel, even though it's not the same as onen, he also is lacking that simcha, he's lacking that yishuv hadat. Let's say someone who's been excommunicated. Is he allowed to send korbanot to the Beit HaMikdash? So we've excommunicated him. Yeah? Could he send the korban or not? The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Tashma. Let's learn. All the years the Jewish people were in the desert, minudim him. As we said already before, HaKadosh Baruch Hu withdrew his presence from the Jewish people and from Moshe while they were punished in the desert until they got to the edge of the desert to be able to come to Eretz Israel. So, minudim ayu, they were excommunicated from Hashem. V'shilchu korbanotehem, and still they did korbanot. the Jewish people had korban, the korban tamid every morning. The korbanot were being brought on behalf of the Jewish people. So you see that someone who's minudeh, who's excommunicated, is still able to send korbanot. Gemara says, Amalei Abaye, we already saw this before. Abaye said, Vidilma minudeh l'shamayim shani. Maybe the reason why they were able to send korbanot is because they were excommunicated by heaven, not by an earthly court. And therefore, even though they were able to do that for a heavenly excommunication, maybe a earthly excommunication is more strict and they would not be able to do so. The Gemara says, what are you talking about, Abaye? Amalei Abaye, Dilma minudeh shamayim shani dekil, because it's less strict. The Gemara says, kil, heavenly ban, heavenly excommunication is lighter, is less strict. Ve'amret, didn't you say, Chamir, earlier on, when we were talking about learning from minudeh shamayim, you said that it was more strict, and therefore you didn't want to learn from there. So now you're telling me it's less strict, and the Gemara says, yeah, its truth is, Sipuke misapkele, Abaya does not know, is it more strict or less strict? So therefore, madchele, so whichever way you're going to try and prove to him, you see this is the halakha over there, it's stricter, so therefore for sure over here, maybe here's lenient. If you see if it's more lenient, maybe here's more strict. Abaya is saying, I don't know, so therefore I'm asking the question in each case. The Gemara says, Mitzorah, so we don't have an answer. Mitzorah, Maushi Shaleh Korbanotav. How about a Mitzorah? Is he able to send the Korban?
No. To
the Beit HaMikdash, Tashma, says the Gemara. Let's come close and listen. The Tanya, the Braita says, V'acharei taharato, when you have a Kohen and the Kohen is Tameh, and V'acharei taharato, after his Tahara, so he gets pure, and after he's now pure, Achar prishato menamet, after he separates himself from the tum'ah of a dead body, Shiv'at yamim yispirulo, they count 7 days. Elu shiv'at yimei sfiro, these are the 7 days of his counting. What does it mean of his counting? Not of avelut, but of mitzorah. So, just to be clear, the way the Braita is understanding this is that what we're talking about is a dual Kohen situation. Talking about someone who is, number one, unpure because he's an avel, so he had someone pass away, right. But also he happens to be a mitzorah at the same time. Ubiyom bo'o el hakodesh el hatzeh hapinimit l'sharet b'kodesh, and on the day that he comes to the Beit HaMikdash, into the inner sanctum, l'sharet b'kodesh, to serve, yakriv hatato, he brings his korban. Zu asrit ha'efa shelo. This is the asrit ha'efa that a korban brings when he comes to work for the first time. So it seems like the Braita is expressing that there's all sorts of things happening here at the same time. Number one, he's a mitzorah. Number two, he's tameh from a dead body. Oh. Number three, the guy is this is his first day at work. Okay? Tough day. So he's got a lot of things going on. Hadat needs a little bit more time management. Maybe he needs an EA or a PA like me. Okay? He scheduled everything at the same time. So the Gemara is basically saying what happens in a scenario where these things coincide. So the Gemara gave its opinion. Did Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Omer, the real point that we want to get to is Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, B'yom bo'o, on the day that he comes to the court to bring, Yakriv, Bizman shira'ui libiyah, ra'ui lahakrava. When is he able to bring his korban? When biyom bo'o, when he's able to enter into the sanctuary. Until you're able to come in yourself, you can't bring korbanot on behalf of you either. Bizman she'eno ra'ui libiyah, eno ra'ui lahakrava. So here, what do we see? A mitzorah, we know, is not able to come into the temple because he's banished. Like we said yesterday, badad yeshev, he needs to sit outside the camp. So if a mitzorah is not able to come into the Beit HaMikdash, he's also not able to have korbanot brought on his behalf. So far, so good. So we know that a mitzorah is not able to bring a korban. We know that a avel is not able to bring a korban because he's not whole. Minudeh, we don't have a proof. Okay? So far, good? Now, I want everyone to take 1 second. Take a look now down at this chart together. All right? There's a chart on page 16A1. And I just want to review. All right? Look at down the left column. Hair cutting, donning tefillin, greeting others, studying Torah, laundering clothes, working at a job, bathing, doing rechitza, wearing shoes, intimate relations, sending sacrifices. Look at Avel. Forbidden, 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 forbidden. Wrapping his head, Avel, wrapping his head out of mourning, we said? Obligated. Tearing clothes, obligated. Overturning his bed, obligated. So all of these things, the Avel is the most strict. Now let's look for 1 second at Mitzorah. Skip to the last column. Hair cutting we saw, forbidden. Right? Tefillin, we didn't have an answer. If the Mitzorah wears tefillin. When it comes to greeting, forbidden. Studying Torah, Mitzorah is allowed. Laundering, forbidden. Working, bathing, wearing shoes, we don't know. Marital relations, forbidden. Sending sacrifices, forbidden. So what is a Mitzorah forbidden in? He's forbidden cutting his hair. We know. What do we know? He's forbidden from greeting others. He's forbidden from laundering. He's forbidden from marital relations. And he's forbidden from sending sacrifices.
What happens to someone who...
The only thing we know he's permitted to do is to study Torah. The other ones, tefillin and tefillin, working, bathing, wearing shoes, we don't know, unresolved. Okay? Same thing, wrapping his head, obligated, rending garment, obligated. Overturning bed, we don't know. So the Mitzorah is half-half, basically. A lot of forbidden, very few permitted, but a bunch of unresolved. Now let's look at the Minudeh. The Minudeh has far more unresolved than anything else. He's forbidden from cutting his hair, right? He's forbidden from laundering. So the only two that are forbidden, absolutely sure, is cutting hair and washing clothes, right? Everything else is unresolved. The only two things that we know he's permitted in is studying Torah and working. Okay? So we really have a sliding scale of these three things. So remember, Joe, you kept asking me in the beginning, I don't know what's going on. Are we talking about Avel? How do we get to Mitzorah? How do we get to Minudeh? And we mentioned that they share things in common. Here now we see that actually there's only, look at laundering. Yeah, you have, you hit the jackpot. You know, cherries, cherries, cherries. Forbidden, forbidden, forbidden. Hair cutting, forbidden, forbidden, forbidden. For nothing else. Are they the same?
Is there anything else? All obligated? Nothing.
Sorry?
Obligated, obligated, obligated? No.
Obligated? No.
We don't have it.
No, not one.
Right.
Okay? So the only two things that they all share in common is laundering and hair cutting. All right? Now, the reason why we brought it up then, so why'd they bring it up if there's, seems like they're less alike than they are alike? The answer is, Joey, because the Mishnah was about hair cutting and laundry. So the only two things that they were exactly identical for is for the two things that we spoke about in the Mishnah. But once the Mishnah saw that they were forbidden, 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 so on these two things, it now asked, what about all these other categories? Now, when we say they're unlike because it's forbidden, unresolved, unresolved, or forbidden, unresolved, forbidden, it might be that that's another run the table, because it's unresolved. If we rule that it's also forbidden, that would be something else, that they're similar, you see? But we don't know. All right, now, what's the halacha? Now that we have all these unresolved, so there seems to be a machloket, all right? Exactly how we rule when something is unresolved. But we had a basic principle, if you remember,
If it's from the Torah.
that when something is unresolved, if it's from the Torah, you go strict. If it's from the Rabbanan, you go lenient. So it would depend on whether that question was a question of the Oraita or the Rabbanan. Okay? So if you want to look, you want to see this, I think it's note 3 at the end, maybe? I think it might be note 3. Yeah, about how, note 3 at the end. You see there's a difference in the Rishonim as to how we rule practically now that we're left with unresolved, okay? Either way, we've now finished all those cases. That was a marathon, not a sprint. Let's continue at the top now, 16a1. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava. We now talked all this time about putting someone in excommunication. But what does that actually look like? Amar Rava. Minalan, how do we know? The mishadrin shlicha de be'edina umizamnin le'edina. How do we know that we take shliach bedin? What's a shliach bedin? Every bedin has judges, but it also has like the officers of the court. That's a shliach bedin. Okay, so the officers of the court, they have responsibilities with regards to carrying out the requisite things that make the court operate. So says the Gemara, how do we know that you send someone to a defendant? How do you know? Maybe the guy has to choose to walk into Beit Din by himself. Maybe the Beit Din convenes when they see him. The Gemara says dichtiv because it says Vayishlach Moshe lekro leDatan ve'Aviram b'nei Eliav. Moshe Rabbeinu sent to Datan Aviram b'nei Eliav. He sent a messenger calling them to court. So you see that when it comes to being judged in court, there's a shaliach bedin that goes to you and then tells you you're summoned. We issue you a summons. Fascinating, by the way. Literally, I was actually just going to say that. There's many times where a person might avoid a court case because they haven't figured out how to serve him yet. Okay? So the first thing that has to come is a hazmana ledin, is a summons to bet din. The Gemara continues. Uminalan dimizamnina ledina. How do we know that we call him to be judged? Okay, now this is not the same as what we said just before. Okay, because before we talked about that we tell him to come, but how do we know that not only that do we invite him to come, but that we summon him, we make him come? The Gemara says, you and everybody, you be in front of God tomorrow. He required them that they should be there in the morning. So we can not only invite you to come, we can compel you to come. Says the Gemara, L'kameh gavra rabba. How do we know that a person, when they issue the summons, part of the summons is who are you standing in front of? Your Rav Moshe Feinstein, alav shalom, summons you to court. You mention who the great rabbi is, if there is one, an outstanding rabbi in the Beit Din. You mention that person as part of the Beit Din. The Beit Din of the Chazon Ish of Chacham Ovadia Yosef is calling you to Beit Din. How do you know it? Because Moshe Rabbeinu said, who's the court is comprising the Beit Din? It's me and also Lifnei Amonai, in front of God. So the summons also needs to include who the person is that's calling you to court. Now, I just want to make sure everybody understands. The refusal of that summons is obviously a big chutzpah, right? Let's say I've been called to court by Beit Din, chutzpah. But the chutzpah is magnified by the size of the person that summoned you to court. If some random guy says, I want you to come for lunch, and I say no, all right, whatever. The President of the United States says, I want you to come for lunch. How do you say no to the President of the United States? So here we're seeing the idea that part of the rejection of the summons and the castigation that the person receives for not listening to the summons has to be with the name of the big man, the big rabbi, or in this case Hashem, mentioned. At uplanya. How do we know that when we tell the person to come to Beit Din, we don't just say, I'm calling Jack to Beit Din. But you have to tell him who the other person is. What would be the alternative? I walk in and I say, Avi, you're summons to court. What? For what? You'll see when you get there. How do we know that the summons has to say your name and the name of the other person? the person who's calling you to court, so to speak. You're the plaintiff and the defendant.
Right.
The Gemara says, because Ata vehem ve'Aharon. Moshe Rabbeinu said, I'm calling you and them and Aharon. So they're on one side, Aaron's on the other. But you see that Moshe Rabbeinu put it into the words of the summons. The kav'ina and zimna. How do we know that you have to give a time where the person is going to be in court? You can't just say, come to court at your earliest convenience and we'll add you to the docket. It doesn't work like that. How do we know? The Gemara says,
You need to assign the time.
the Gemara says, but how do we know it? How do we know it? The Gemara says, because the Pasuk also says, you and them and Aaron come before God, machar. Told them the day,
There's a time and place.
there's a time that's associated. The Gemara says, okay, now you gave the person a time, and the person didn't show up. Do you issue a second summons?
Validity.
Zimna, bata zimna.
Right.
Do we give the guy a time after we gave him a first time they didn't show up? Right? Dichtiv, we learned it. Kar'o sham, par'o melech Mitzrayim, sha'on he'evir ha'moed. Okay, now there's a question over here, exactly what the circumstances are. Two different opinions as to how this operated. But over here you see that they called out against Paro, right? Sha'on, that he came with arrogance. He'evir ha'moed, that he passed the time that he was supposed to be here. So you see that there was not only a first summons, but they were calling him out now after having missed the first one. So you see Zimna, Bata Zimna, you issue a second summons.
It's not part of the Jewish people and the Jewish
Correct.
laws.
Correct. But you still see that when you're summoning someone,
Regardless of the
you could do there's an idea of a second summons, that you give a person a second chance to appear even after they did not appear on the first date. Uminalan mitpakar b'shlicha bedina. How do we know that if the person, he's mitpaker, he's disrespectful, he dismisses, he curses out the shlucha bedin, the officer of the court, ve'ativa amar, that the officer of the court comes back to the court and tells them, this is what the guy said to me, this is how he behaved, and still, lo mitchazik lishna bisha, it's not considered to be lashon hara. Normally, the halacha is, if you want to tell somebody that somebody else did something wrong, they're not allowed to believe you, even if you say it.
Can you say that again?
If, let's say I come and I say, Jack misbehaved, terrible guy, I tell you. That's lashon hara. You know why? Because you're not allowed to believe me if I tell you lashon hara.
You're allowed not to believe.
Not you're allowed not to believe. You're not allowed to believe.
Wait a minute. Let's say you were told to come to me and do something, and
Wait, I don't want to bring it back yet. Wait, I'll bring it back in a second. If I tell you Jack did something wrong, are you allowed to believe lashon hara?
If my rabbi tells me, I thought I should
No.
believe him.
Nope.
So, but lashon hara, isn't that different from saying something negative about somebody?
No, lashon hara is when you say something negative about
What
somebody.
if it's true?
Still lashon hara is even if it's true.
What about being positive?
Okay, sorry.
Even if you say something positive.
No, positive is not lashon hara. But lashon hara, I'm not allowed to believe. Hold on one second. When do you believe somebody negative information about someone? If you have witnesses. Okay? So if you come single to say something bad, there's no reason that they should believe you. If there's no reason they should believe you, so why should they believe you?
Right, it's a personal opinion.
Okay? You're not allowed to. So the Gemara says, okay, now the Beit Din sends a shaliach. He comes to you and he says, he summons the court. The guy tells him, curses him out, yells at him, doesn't show him any respect. The officer of the court comes back to the court and reports. The guy showed me no respect.
Lashon hara.
But he's one witness.
Two. You need two.
And you need two.
Right.
Says the Gemara, how do you know that he's allowed to come back and report negative behavior, right? What's it called in the court when the person is not showing respect to the court? What's that called? We need Morris here.
Contempt?
Yes, I find you in contempt of court. So a person also could be found in contempt of court, right? So the question is, how do you know that he's allowed to say it's not lashon hara? The The Gemara answers, Dichtiv, because it says, Ha'eneh ha'anashim hahem tinaker. When Datan and Aviram had the Shaliach Bedin, Moshe sent for them. He said, come, you, Datan, Aviram, come, and Aharon, you be here tomorrow in front of Hashem. They responded, you know what? You could poke our eyes out, we're not coming. Right? Even if their eyes would be poked out, they're not going to come. So they spoke very disrespectfully to the Shaliach, to the messenger, the officer of Moshe Rabbeinu's court. But how did Moshe Rabbeinu know that that's what they said if they didn't come back? Must be
They're right.
the Shaliach reported back and told Moshe, I told them to come. But they said, even if you poke their eyes out, they're not going to come. So you see, a Shaliach Bedin is allowed to
Report back. And
report
it's
back.
not Lashon Hara.
It's not Lashon Hara.
But it's
So you
one
see,
person.
even though it's one person. So even though normally the law is one person, you're not allowed to believe, so therefore he's not allowed to say it. In the case of an officer of the court, he's obligated to do so because the court needs to understand the way the person is interacting with the court, how he sees his position vis-a-vis the court. Do they need to treat him as a hostile witness or not? The court needs to have that information. So therefore, it's okay. Now, the question gets asked. We're saying that Moshe Rabbeinu must have known from from the Shaliach Bedin. He must have told him. How else could Moshe Rabbeinu have known?
By them not showing up.
No, but in other words, how did he know what they said?
Oh, he was told. You're saying
So,
another way.
no, the Gemara says that's what he was told, and that's the proof
Right.
that they're allowed to tell. The officer of the court's allowed to tell the Beit Din.
Right.
But there's an alternative. Rashi says, Moshe Rabbeinu was the biggest prophet that ever lived.
He saw it coming.
Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu knew what they said because he was a prophet. How does the Gemara prove it? Maybe he was a Navi. So there's answers to this question. But I have my personal answer.
Beautiful. It's
My
like,
personal answer is,
it's like a detective.
we know that Moshe Rabbeinu at this time was very angry, he was very upset. We have a teaching that says that the Shekhinah only rests on a person when they're b'simcha, when they enjoy.
Right. Exactly.
We learn this from the idea the Pasuk says, V'haya kinagen ha-minagen, when the player would come and play, then V'tihya alav ruach Hashem, the Spirit of God was upon him. They would have people come and play musical instruments, the Nevi'im, so that their spirit would be elevated, they would feel joy, and when they were feeling joy, then they were able to experience prophecy. Moshe Rabbeinu right now is very agitated. So even though he was a prophet, he would not have experienced prophecy during this time of agitation. That's my answer to this question, but there are other answers as well to this question. Let's continue. The Gemara says, "Uminalan de mishamtinan." So you've just told me the procedure of how you call the guy to court. How do you know that when the guy doesn't come, that you put him in cherem, the mishamtinan? Now, it's important to understand that there's going to be three different levels, either 2 or 3 different levels of excommunication. We're calling them excommunication together, okay? We're putting them all in one pot, because that's like the general idea. But there's 3 different levels. Says the Gemara. Uminalan de mishamtinan. How do we know that you excommunicate the guy for not coming? Dichtiv, it says, Oru miroz. Oru means an expression of cursing, like arur. Oru miroz, cursed is miroz. Now, why is miroz excommunicated? In the story of Deborah and Barak, now let's just review in history. There's a time when the Jewish people are leaderless, and they appoint Deborah HaNevi'ah, right, to be the woman who's the prophet and also leading the Jewish people. Right. Barak is her husband. She is the general. He is the general of her army. Okay, her husband. They're being attacked by Sisera, by their enemies. So they reach out to Meroz, and they tell Meroz, please come with your fighters and fight with the Jewish people, fight on behalf of the God of Israel. And Meroz does not respond. What does Deborah say for the lack of response to the summons? She says, Oru Meroz. She curses him. So you see that a person who doesn't respond to the summons is excommunicated. Now, the first thing I want to point out is that you see that the Gemara is equating the concept of Oru, which means a curse, and excommunication. I don't know, I don't think most people think that that's what excommunication is. Like, yeah, one of the things that they do, if let's say guy is refusing to give a get to his wife, they're not living together, but he just doesn't want to give her a get, he's just holding her chained, aguna. All right, so what do? You know, they call the guy to Beit Din. Let's say the guy doesn't come to Beit Din. What do? They put the guy in Cherem, they excommunicate him. So everybody knows that they put him in Cherem. The guy can't come to shul, he can't get an aliyah, all sorts of laws, you can't do business with him, which was what we spoke about with Menudeh. So, I think people just see that as like a leverage. Like, make it uncomfortable for him, we talked about the other time. You know, draw him to court. But over here you see the Gemara saying much more than that. Curse. Oru, yeah, it's like a curse from the Beit Din. Because for not coming. Right. It's very powerful. Gemara says, so where do we know Mishamtina? Because it says Oru Miroz. The Gemara says, yep, Dehachi Svara the Gavra Rabba. Now, where do we know that when someone is now given excommunication, it's not enough to just say, you're excommunicated, you're excommunicated, you're excommunicated. Right? It's not enough. What do you have to tell him? You have to tell him, you have been excommunicated by Rav Moshe Feinstein. Dehachi Svara the Gavraba. That's what he decided. Dechtiv, because when she said this excommunication to Meroz for not coming, she says, you're cursed. Amar Malach Hashem, says the angel of God. She told him who the excommunication was from. So you see that it came from the angel of God. Now, I've mentioned this many times. Sometimes Malach Hashem means an angel of Hashem, like a spiritual angel. Sometimes it means an emissary of Hashem. In this case, some people translate it that saying what Devorah was saying was from Balak, who was a messenger of Hashem. So that's how she phrased the excommunication. Okay? Uminalan, says the Gemara, Dimahraminan. How do we know that not only do you excommunicate, but you also cherem, which is a much higher form of excommunication, all right? Or the highest form of excommunication. Dichtiv, because it says, Oru Aror. It says cursed. Not only indicating the lower level of curse, but also indicating the higher level of cursed. Okay? Now, let me just, I want to bring out something which I think is really powerful. What is the first level? We described what comes with the first level of the curse. But Herem, besides for the laws of separating from the court, from the community, people not going next to you, there's also in Herem a curse that the person should die. Which is...
He should die because they didn't go to court?
Yeah. Now, crazy.
Eliminate.
Right?
But he didn't even go in
Now the person has an opportunity. Why? Because a disrespect of law is a rejection of all of the Torah. The court represents the Torah law. When a person the court tells him to come and he just completely ignores the arbiters of law, he's rejecting the Beit Din. Wow. He's rejecting all of Torah law. Now he can solve this because, as we saw, when it comes to Beit Din, they take off the nidui, they take off the cherem. Okay? Says the Gemara. Where do we learn this from? Because it says double aror. De'achil v'shati b'hadeh. How do we know that if someone, because I just told you, we told the guy no one's allowed to be with him, right? So the guy's off to the side. How do we know that if his friends go out for dinner with him, they're like, oh, I feel bad. You can't come to shul. No one's doing business with you. You're a persona non grata. They will hang out with you. People that hang out with him, that they also get the what's it called? Get the curse. Tichtiv Yosheveha. It says that the people that are its inhabitants of that city of Meroz also have the curse because they're staying with them. Now, you got to understand this idea. The point of this is for the person to be driven to accept the consequences of his actions. A person who's standing by that person is not only saying that they themselves are okay with what he's done because they're hanging out with him, even though there's a ban from being with him. They also are complicit in him not coming to the court. Because what's giving him the strength to not cave to the pressure and own up to what he's done? The fact that he has his friends with him. The whole leverage of this is that the person recognizes that if he wants to be part of society, exactly. He needs to do the right thing. How do we know that not only do we give all these things, but we also express why? We don't just say this guy refused to come to court without giving him the anonymity of his actions. But dichtiv, because it says when she cursed Meroz, she says ki lo ba'u le'ezrat Hashem, because they did not come to the summons to stand by the people of and the nation of Hashem. Ve'amar Ula, and Ula expressed on this, be'arba me'a shipure shamta barak Meroz. With 400 shofars did Barak do this excommunication. They blew the shofar with 400 shofars. What does that tell you? That tells you that not only did they do it behind closed doors, but they sent out, they blew the trumpets, Yani. All right? Now the Gemara says, who is this person, Meroz? Ika da'amri gavra rabahava. Some people say he was a great and powerful person who didn't come. It was a general, someone that could have turned the tide of the war towards the Jewish people. Ika da'amri kochava hava. And some people say that Meroz was a star of in the heavens. We know that even though there's Hakadosh Baruch Hu could always override the mazal, the constellations, the stars that align for things to happen in a certain way. Am Yisrael needs to be deserving of coming above the mazal. But if a person is not deserved, God doesn't decide to save you from it, then the mazal actually has an impact. So a lot of people think in mazal Yisrael, there's no mazal for Israel. Mazalot don't mean anything. The stars, the constellations in Shamayim, they have no power, so to speak, not independent of God. God gave them, so to speak, an influence to be able to be the things that bring shefa to our world, right? So therefore, the second opinion is that Devorah called upon Meroz, the star in Shamayim, the mazal of Sisera, to come and stand by the Jews. And Meroz did not do so. So Deborah cursed the star. Now, how are you going to curse an inanimate object?
Why did she curse?
Why would she curse an inanimate object? The answer is that you see that God himself did that. He cursed Chava with a difficult childbirth and to be subservient to her husband. He cursed Adam that his parnasah should come by the sweat of his brow. But then he said, Arura Adama, cursed is the land that produced this tree, the Etzadat, exactly why it was cursed. But you see that the land didn't do something that it should have done, and Hakadosh Baruch Hu curses the land for the fact that it didn't do something. So too, Deborah also said, Meroz, how do you not Now, by the way, what's fascinating is that in her story, it says actually more than that. It says, you want to pass me a chumash? Do you have a chumash? Bring me the, what's it called? The art scroll, the 5 books. I want to show you the what's it called? The pasuk specifically that mentions it. Well, this will end. The pasuk says about this battle. So the haftarah of Parashat Bishalach, which is when the Jewish people sang Az Yashir. So the haftarah, yes, please. The haftarah of that parasha is the song of Devorah. Okay? So Devorah sings a song to God in the aftermath of the war that was won. So I just want to read you one line based on the Gemara that we just saw. Says the Gemara, says the Shirat Devorah.
When did she do this song?
Huh?
When is this song?
After the battle is won.
After it's
Vatashar Devorah uBarak ben Avinoam bayom hahu lemor. Right? Befro aperaot b'Yisrael b'itnadev am Baruch Hashem. Beautiful, right? Yeah. But if you keep looking in the story, it's actually remarkable, and it talks about the war itself, and she's thanking Hashem. And listen to this line. Min shamayim nilchamu hakochavim, from the heavens did the stars fight. Mimsilotam nilchamu im Sisera, from their path did they fight with Sisera. So in other words, the stars themselves, the mazalot, were fighting against Sisera. They should not have been able to win this war, and they won the war so decisively that Devorah says the stars were fighting against the Sisera. So when I read this Gemara, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, maybe that's why the first opinion says it was, what's it called? It was the general, and the second opinion says it was a star, because it says min shamayim nilchamu hakochavim. From the shamayim did the stars fight, right? That they left their normal pathway, which is the mazal, right? Where the stars are, how they align, right? In order to be able to defeat Sisera, they turned the mazal against him. So if it says that the stars did fight, it sounds like Meroz did what it was supposed to do. If Meroz was a star. So maybe the first opinion, that's why it doesn't agree with the second opinion. It says that Meroz was a general because actually the stars did fight. The second opinion, however, might hold that pasuk is talking about the other stars. And that's why she calls out specifically Meroz, that Meroz as a star was not doing what it needed to do in order to be able to join in the fight. Okay?
So Meroz could have been an object in the sky as a star, or an actual human being as a general?
Yes, so those are the two opinions. One opinion says it was a general of that could have joined in the battle to help against Sisera. The second opinion is he wasn't a big general, but rather it was a star that she was cursing that did not align. So we're going to pick up from here, Be'ezrat Hashem, next time on 16a3. Baruch Hanei Le'olam. Amen ve'amen. Alamak, boys. See you soon.